most of the people in this room, I think, understand the challenges that come with creating a true lean culture within an organization. It takes courageous leadership. It takes the ability to challenge people. It takes an unyielding commitment. It takes an ability to help people understand the why and the power behind a lean management system. It is my honor to introduce two of our leaders who I believe really have all of those characteristics and are leaders within Denver Health, two of our own. The first person I'd like to introduce is my boss, Beth Fingado. Beth joined Denver Health in the winter of 2013 and is responsible for the lean department, the Baldridge application process, and support of strategic planning activities. In previous roles, Beth was responsible for health system priorities in the areas of quality and process improvement, patient safety, analytics, and service delivery excellence. She is a trained facilitator holding a national certification as a lean sensei and inspires us every day. Dr. Tim Harlan joined Denver Health in 2013. He serves as both Chief Operating Officer and Chief Acceleration Officer. No small task, to say the least. Prior to joining Denver Health, he was Chief Operating Officer at Hennepin Health System in Minneapolis, Minnesota. His professional career started on Wall Street, but for 27 years has been focused on systematically improving the delivery of healthcare to patients and developing future industry leaders. He holds a Doctor of Science degree from the University of Alabama, Birmingham, and an MBA in General Management from Emory University. Please join me in welcoming our first two keynotes, Beth and Tim.
All right, getting our logistics set up here. All right, good morning, everybody. They said it was a big group. They weren't lying. Welcome. I really appreciate everybody being here. So I know that you all, for most of you, have full-time jobs. Your phone's going to be buzzing. You're going to be getting emails. And so taking a full day away to come and learn and share is something that I greatly appreciate. And it's our goal to make this really worthwhile. We're going to tag team on this presentation, and with any of these kind of presentations, you worry about, well, am I too high and lofty, and it's hard to get some concrete value out of it, or I get too deep in the weeds, and then I kind of lose folks. So we're going to try to find that balance inside of this presentation. My goal is that you get a good understanding of who Denver Health is, and then through some of the examples, you get a sense of what we're about. And in all of these slides, please know we talk about it's about where we're trying to get to, not necessarily where we are. So it's the state of it's the state of becoming, not a state of being necessarily. We're on that journey, and we're working hard at it every day. And it's really, really hard work, and we'll try to highlight some of that. So just to orient you a little bit to Denver Health. So Denver Health is relatively a good-sized organization. It's pretty big. We got about 7,000 employees, but in the grand scheme of health systems, we're what I would call maybe a medium-sized health system, but we got these wonderful pieces. So we're truly an integrated health system. And what this infographic is meant to sort of convey is that there's more than just this main campus. And when you talk to people about Denver Health, they say, oh, I know where Denver Health is. That's down on Broadway and 6th, and that's the campus that we're at now. And we have big inpatient tower. We run trauma system out of this campus. We have a whole host of specialty clinics, primary care clinics, but that's not all we are. We're across all of the city and county of Denver. We have distributed community health centers in 9 different locations. We're in 17 schools, most of which are high schools, around the city and county. We run the paramedic division, 911. You see our ambulances around. 2 blocks from here is the Rocky Mountain Poison Center. That's part of Denver Health. It's regional poison center for folks that call in, but it's also, we have commercial contracts. So if you were to call the 800 number on the back of your Clorox bottle, it would ring down here on Bannock. And so we have that. We have a health plan, just a variety of these of pieces so that as we think about and strategize for the future, I believe we're well positioned. given even though we don't know exactly what's going to be coming at us with health reform. So that's just a sense of who we are. We do employ doctors. All of our doctors are faculty at the University of Colorado, and we are an academic health center. And so, as with most academic health centers, we have three basic missions. We're here to provide clinical care, we're here to advance the science of healthcare, and we are here to educate and train the next generation of healthcare providers. And we do have residents on campus, but we also train nurses, and we train medical technologists, and a whole host of other health professions. So this graph, or this heat map, if you will, is how I talk about our mission. And if you're going to spend time at Denver Health, you will hear people talk about the mission, and I hope you hear it either overtly or indirectly as you spend time with us today. This map shows the intensity of poverty around the city and county of Denver. So the darker the area, the higher the percentage of people that live under the federal poverty level. And what I like to do to sort of highlight our mission is to overlay where Denver Health puts its assets. Those dots represent our clinics, school-based, they represent our health centers, they represent this campus. And so when we talk about mission, Denver Health lives its mission. And you can tell that by where we put our time, our energy, our talent, and where we write checks. Where we build clinics and we put bricks and mortar, and our capital is scarce because our margins are thin. We put them in the poorest places with the highest need. And to me, that says more about who Denver Health is than just about any graph I could put up there. I could put the words, but this speaks to those words. So let me tell you about our journey. And this graph has time on the bottom, and it talks about sort of subjectively organizational maturity along the other axis. And we started on our lean journey back in 2005. And we were blessed to have a sort of visionary CEO, Patty Gabeau, and she started to study the lean production or the Toyota production system, and she started to try to think deeply about this and how that might apply to healthcare. And so she started us on that journey, and I think appropriately, I wasn't here in 2005, but she started us on tools. And I think she knew deep down that lean was more about just doing tools, but she needed to build the capability inside the organization. And she needed to exercise sort of this habit around performance improvement and excellence and process improvement. And so we started with understanding our value streams. And we started with practicing inside of those value streams with RIEs, and we trained black belts. And it was very regimented in those first few years because in her mind, that's the way we were going to build this into our cultures. We had to practice it. So we did all the tools, and we 5S'd the organization, and we did RIEs, and we did 2Ps and 3Ps as we began to think about new processes, and we stayed focused on value streams. And in 2012, we had the privilege of applying for Shingo and for the REMPEX Peak Award. And we were fortunate to win both. And I put a line there, and we put a big asterisk there because that was an inflection point. And we weren't out to win the award, but what we found inside both of those reports, and if you put both of those reports side by side, what we found was they were very similar in what they told us. You guys are doing a really good job of thinking about your processes and thinking about continuous improvement, but what you're not thinking about is where you're going. Where is the vision of this organization? What do you want to accomplish in the next 3 to 5 years? And both of those reports were very similar in terms of that feedback. So we incorporated that. And beginning in 2012, we started on a strategic planning process. And I think for the first time in this organization history. Prior to that, a lot of the strategy was up in Patty's head. And so we started to put it on paper. And we clunked through it a couple of years. Each year we got a little better. We involved physicians. We involved executives. We started to get data. We got more sophisticated in our data. We started to define primary and secondary service areas. And we started to bring real insight into where the industry was going, what our competitors were doing, what our patients needed, what was happening demographically inside our county. And we began to put together plans. And so we weren't just thinking about what about today in the world when we started to think about 2+ years out and exercise that from 2012 to 2016. We really internalized that feedback that we got from Shingo. Now, if you don't know, if you win the Peak Award, you get a 5-year window in which to apply for the National Malcolm Baldrige Award. and you've reached the hurdle and you can automatically apply. We thought, well, that would be a great thing. Let's apply for the national award because we're inside of this window. And in late 2015, we were like, yikes, that window's starting to close. We better start thinking about this in terms of an application. Well, we're poor. We don't make much money. We take care of a lot of folks without insurance, and our margins are really thin. We don't have a lot of cash in the bank. And we're like, boy, it'd be great if we could bring some consultants in to help us think through this application, where we are now, and help us to prepare for that. But we couldn't do that because we didn't have any money. And so we also realized that, hey, if you win the Peak Award before, you can apply again. And you can get an automatic site visit. So we're like, we've done some great things. We really thought deeply about what they told us the last time. We put in place some changes. Let's apply again. And let's get nationally trained Malcolm Baldrige surveyors in here and looking at who we are and what we're doing and how well we've deployed everything. So they came back late, fall of 16, and we won the Peak Award again. We had advanced enough inside of our thinking. And we learned a lot about our application, and we learned a lot about our organization. But we also got another very valuable reflection point. And they said, you're good on process, you're good on continuous improvement, you've really come a long way in terms of strategy and alignment. But when we walk across your organization and we want to see evidence that the people inside your departments understand your business and know how that business is running, not last month, not 45 days ago, but last shift, yesterday, we see it in some places, we don't see it in others. Do you really, truly understand your core processes? We're like, wow, that's powerful. Do you really understand your core competencies? So as you strategically plan and you say you want to do this over the next 5 years, are you tying it to something you're really good at, or are you doing some wishful thinking inside of that strategy? We're like, wow, that's powerful. And they said, we don't see the evidence that we'd like to see around your partnerships. You cannot be successful on your own. Where are the partnerships inside of your vendors and other folks in this market that are going to help you be successful? And we said, wow, that's powerful. So we got great reflection again in 2016, and it allowed us to apply for the Malcolm Baldrige Award. We did not get a site visit. Application went in February of this year. We got notice earlier this summer that we did not get a site visit, but we are going to get a report. We're going to get another report in November, and I can draw another line on this graph that says in fall of 2018, we got valuable feedback from surveyors, and it will allow us to move forward. This is a framework I love. Beth introduced it to me. It's got how well are you – oh, I'm sorry. I'm on the wrong slide.
Yep. There you go.
There we go.
Oh, and the thing came off.
What happened?
Somehow we lost our green. It is improve the worst.
You can blame me for a lot of things. You can't blame me for that.
That is not our thing.
All right. So the green is
Improvement.
The improvement. All right. So this has three basic components. It's are you aligned to your? Do you have a strategy? Are you aligned to it? Do you have the tools and capability inside your organization to execute on it? And are you training your people in order to be successful inside of your organization? Are you building the capability inside your people to be successful? You want all three of these things to be in balance. If you go back to my first slide, we were heavy on the tools, heavy on that capability initially. This would be way out of balance. Then we got some feedback, and we said, oh, yeah, we got to start building strategy and aligning. And so you could have readjusted this circle. It would still be out of balance. And now we're working on the capability of side of our people, and we're trying to bring it back into focus. We ought to have balance inside of each of these three things. It doesn't say it's an equivalent amount of work inside of each thing, but there ought to be effort in each of those three sections. So what we're going to do is sort of the outline for this morning's presentation is walk you through each of those three sections. I'll take two, and Beth's going to take one. So the first one is on the improvement dimension. And this is a simple schematic that says improvement is not just driven from my office at the top or Robin Wittenstein, our CEO, but that there needs to be improvement work going across this organization. In fact, the bulk of this, you can read this at that bottom part that's closest to the work, that's frontline leadership and staff, is the majority of the improvement work that needs to occur in your organization. So this triangle sort of reflects ultimate organizational effort. So daily issues and problems. I was at a Gemba board yesterday. 4B is a med-surg unit over in our Fab B. pavilion. We have a nurse leader in front of a bunch of managers and execs and directors, and she's talking about improving the patient experience, and she's talking about the measures she is using on a daily basis in order to track as a leading indicator ultimately what she wants to see in terms of an outcome related to an increase in the patient's experience on her unit. And when we challenged her on how did you choose those leading metrics, she had a really good answer. We scoured the comments inside of our patient experience surveys. We began to emerge some themes out of that, and we realized that this issue of nurse courtesy and respect could be addressed in part by being very careful in how we talk to and what names we use to call our patients, i.e., what is the preferred name they wanted. So every single day, every single shift, they track whether or not every single nurse on that unit is using preferred name in every single interaction with those patients. That's the leading indicator. They're trying to drive ultimate patient experience inside of one question, nurse respect. How powerful is that? I didn't go down there and tell them to start doing this. I've got local problem solvers that are working on that. That's that bottom piece. In the middle, we realize some things in a big, complicated bureaucratic organization that sometimes slow to move require some help. Value streams are not contained inside of one department or one unit. It's going to span rev cycle and inpatient and ED. Try to solve a problem in your ED without working on your inpatient. You'll find it's impossible. So you have all this cross-divisional stuff that occurs and you need help. And so we have a wonderful lean department under Beth's leadership that allows leaders to come together in formalized ways using the tools that we've been practicing for years to solve problems that span departments. And then at the very top is where we get into some of our strategic improvements. What does this organization have to accomplish in order to be successful? Not in an incremental way, but often in a transformative way. What are the big goals? And so let me walk you through some of that top piece of the triangle. And this is where the risk is I get too inside baseball, but we'll work through some of these slides. I won't spend a whole lot of time on this. For those of you who aren't in healthcare, of course, every example I give is going to be healthcare, so I apologize for that. But we have 6 operational excellence initiatives. We were doing our strategic planning process, and we said, before we can start growing, before we can start adding new services, there are 6 areas where we better get better at, or none of else will matter. And so we identified rev cycle, and in this case, revenue cycle is for every dollar that we charge, for those aren't in healthcare, we charge $1, but we know we're not going to collect $1 based on our contracts with employers, payers, government payers, and so forth. So there's a dollar per or cents per charge that you get inside of your revenue cycle. You want that to be optimized. You don't want to get paid more than you need. You don't want to be paid less than you need or less than you deserve. So you want to optimize your rev cycle. So that's huge. That's dollars in the door. Managed care. We have a health plan. We have about 88,000 Medicaid patients at risk, meaning if they get sick, we're on the hook for it. We get a PMPM, per member per month payment from the state every month, and the state says, here's your money. Now, whatever happens, you guys are on the hook to care for these patients. We actually love that because it puts the onus on us to improve quality and to improve the quality of their lives and their outcomes, but we have to make sure that area runs really well. Care management, when you go from inpatient to outpatient, we want to do things. We want to give you health risk assessments, and we want to make sure that your A1Cs are in line and stable if you're diabetic and so forth. And so there's all this stuff around care management that we need to be good at if we're going to keep you out of the hospital and improve your quality of life. ED operations. How many people have ever been into an emergency department? All right, most. So the management imperative inside of that space is throughput. I need to get you in. I need to get you into a room. I need to get you to see a physician. I need to run whatever tests we need to run on you. I need to give you some type of disposition, and I need to get you out. We got a lot of folks, so we have this big throughput issue inside of our ED. Patient flow, length of stay. When you get admitted into our hospital, if you stay longer than you need to, you run the risk of increased infection, you run the risk of being a dissatisfied patient, and you also run the risk of clogging up the hospital when we got people in the ED that need to get up into the place. So how do we make sure flow is as efficient as possible inside our inpatient? And then ambulatory. If we can't get you into a primary care clinic, if you call and can't get an appointment, then this whole system grinds to a halt. And that's so essential to us, is that you can get into a clinic, see the doctors that you need to see. So those were the 6 areas. We put big goals around each one of those so that these aren't just incremental improvement, these are stretch goals. And what our CEO gave us permission to do, and I just want to take a moment to talk about this, is because it is so powerful. In healthcare, I don't know if it's true in all the other industries, in healthcare there's a strong desire to jump to a conclusion. In lean parlance, it's just start on that right side of that A3. We're so guilty of it. CEO says, I need you to go fix patient flow in the ED, and off we go to changing things and putting in solutions. And she said, nope, we're not doing that. You're going to spend 3 months, the first quarter of 2018, and you're not going to implement a single thing. In fact, all you're going to do is think about the problem and validate the problem. You're not allowed to do anything else. If you need data, we'll get you data. If you need facilitation, we'll get you facilitation. But all you're going to do is think about the problem, and you're going to validate it. And then she said in the next 3 months, from April till June, you're going to say, what are the hypotheses that are going to drive the improvement to fix that problem? You're going to get to root cause. You're going to figure out what it is that's going to really make a difference, and then you're going to build a plan around it with metrics. We spent 6 months inside our biggest 6 operational excellence initiatives, and we didn't change a single thing. She gave us 6 months to spend on the left side of an A3 so that when we did start to make changes, we were making the right changes. How powerful is that as a message from your CEO? Yeah, there's urgency. We got the whirlwind swirling around us. You've got 6 months so that you can be very deliberate about what you go change. So I won't go through each of these. These are examples. The first one under rev cycle reconciliation was an enormous effort. Think of every clinical area, department, inpatient, outpatient, ancillary area in this hospital, and we said you have to validate what we do. If we do it, whether it's billable or not, we need to know about it, we need to make sure it's in our health record, we need to make sure that we're, if appropriate, applying a charge. The amount of standard work was enormous. The work on part of our lean effort to go and observe and not go with an answer, but to go, what are you doing now? Let me just watch. What report are you using? How often are you doing it? What are you looking at? What challenges are you incurring? We learned a ton, and we're still learning. That's one example inside of 6 efforts. I could give you examples in each one. So big efforts inside of each OpEx. We're tracking it in a detailed way. Our lean department, which I love, I mean, you can go down there. We got stickies. We got colors. We've done observations. We know where we're challenged. It's amazing work. And it's getting results. This is one graph in one OpEx. This is our realization rate over time. And you can see the percentage on that y-axis is started at around 28.4. It's now up, well, we actually crossed 30 last month, I think in August. And you're like, well, going from 28% to 30%, that's not really big. So that's 2 extra cents on a dollar charged. But we charge about $2 billion a year. So when you start multiplying pennies times billions, it translates into big dollars. That work right there, I could not be more proud of. I get a lot of kudos for it, and I am not the one who drove that change. It is our lean team, and it is the people on the front lines that got and became about standard work, and they became about reviewing it and tracking it and making sure it stayed in place. So I'm going to turn it over to Beth to talk about the next dimension.
Good morning, everybody. So I get to create capability. I'm super excited about that because one thing that really drew me to Denver Health initially was that, of course, they were, nationally known for the improvement work that they were doing. But I was brought forward with the challenge by Tim to talk about how do we create capability inside of our organization to do this work at the bottom of that pyramid and not so much at the top where you need lean facilitation to do those kinds of improvements. So one of the first things that we talked about doing is how do you just give some people some core content. And when I first started here, there was a lean fundamentals class, and that was going on quite a bit of time, I think like maybe 3 or 4 years, and we were training black belts inside the organization on basic lean principles, and that was really important and a valuable resource. But it wasn't sufficient. As we started to talk about the things we needed to understand as leaders, just understanding the basics of lean was not going to get us where we needed to get. So we started dabbling in what was called lean management systems. No one had ever heard of that when we first started here. It sounded like maybe we were repackaging the lean fundamentals, and people started to finally really get that what we were doing is looking at managing the improvement work instead of being in the line doing the improvement work, and that there's a different perspective when you think about how do you lead lean efforts as opposed to being in them and being the resource to deliver the value at the bedside. And so we started doing that work, and pretty soon we realized, oh goodness, we don't actually know very well how to measure change, because most of our changes had really been based on this financial model. We're a poor system. We wanted to make sure we were getting the return on investment, and nobody really understood how to measure things like quality or throughput, things like that in their system, because that measurement had been done centrally for many years. So we created something called Tool School, which is really analytics and really trying to understand and measure change. So that was an important capability. But as soon as people got into that class, we realized they don't actually maybe even know how to open Excel. And so that could be a problem. And people were at varying levels, right, and even in terms of understanding that. So now, through our lean work, we're offering how to do certain kinds of functions in Excel to be able to support our improvement, and it also helps people just support generally managing their business. So that's important. In our model, we really talk about leaders as coaches and really being able to help support those that do the work, change the work, manage the work. And we had leaders who were used to leading and who were actually the very best at nursing or the very best at finance, but they weren't the very best at coaching their folks through that. And so we have an incredible 2-day class on how to be a coach inside of improvement. We say we coach the lean game, so there's a very specific way that we think about coaching in the context of that. We're not life coaches, we're lean coaches. And then we've started a managing priorities class, because then we realized we take on too much change. We're always so excited about all the things we've uncovered that are problematic. We don't always know how to prioritize them. And so now we have a whole course on how do you use lean tools to help you figure out how to prioritize your work and really focus in that space. And then we realized, oh gosh, now we finally got over to the right side of the A3. We're ready to implement, and nobody knew how to really create an action plan, to implement on a project plan, to do any of those things. And so sometimes the lean team was getting in as sort of the next best project management resource, and we decided we needed to create some of that capability inside of our system as well, so that people could deploy systematically and keep themselves accountable, the timelines and action items as they implemented. So those have been really exciting things that we do inside of our organization for our folks who want to take this journey with us. We also offer that externally as a way to, A, sort of supplement this, and B, also to do some more shared learning, because when you're talking at a national level with your colleagues from around the country, you're learning from them, they're learning from you, you're sharing experiences, you're developing and growing as a leader, and that's an important exposure for us to have. Aha. We've also been playing with a model called Leaders as Teachers, because we feel that as much as we're pretty darn good instructors inside of the Lean Academy as Lean facilitation staff, we want our leaders, A, to be able to communicate this to their folks, because they listen more to leaders. I'm having Tim do most of this presentation because it's more powerful for me to learn from him, and it's really powerful for him to talk to all of you and to make sure that he's really grasping these concepts. And so we formalize leaders as teachers. If you look inside of the project management class, we don't actually teach that class, That's our PMO office who's been stood up by us. We support the room. We do those kinds of things so that they can walk in from their day jobs and deliver this content. But they're the people teaching that skill to our staff, and we just coordinate that through the Lean office because it's an important part of change education. We also feel like there's a lot of different ways to learn core content. So we offer workshops. We can take one of these modules and take it out on the road with us and work just specifically on an A3 module with some group. We've done book clubs. We walked through a leadership book with Tim's senior leaders for, I believe, about 6 months, just going through every chapter and discussing the content and trying to pull out what we're learning from it. And we have discussion groups. We get people together to just talk through what they're learning, doing, struggling with, all of those pieces. We feel like these are all really important components of developing capability within our organization. This is, oh, it is on. Yeah. How's this? I'll try to talk a little louder. Okay. This is a really kind of silly diagram in terms of a way that we coach, but it sort of captures it in some ways. Down at the bottom, you'll see that there's little A3s and little Paretos and little fishbones and stuff like that. The idea is that the Lean team spends a goodly amount of time going out and working with frontline leaders in terms of how to deploy these tools locally. So if you look at the bottom couple of boxes where it says HIA or non-HIA, that's high impact area or a non-high impact area. But just think of those as like frontline units. We're going out and we're coaching at the elbow with these folks to try to teach them how to use these tools. But one thing that we found is that as people kind of got their sailor legs in the local units, and we'd say, your leader's going to come around and help coach you because they're going to take that coaching class. The leaders came around and were like, I have no idea what to do. I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't understand what an A3 is. I need that capability as well. So the cluster is really like an area leader of maybe all the inpatient units, say, that deliver acute care. The next level leader is the person that administers all of those acute care services. And we're coaching them. And then they start to say the same thing. I need my executive to come around, and I need to understand what that, do they understand what they're looking at so that they don't crash and burn into my work. And so we do executive coaching as well. Right now, as an organization, our team is actively coaching 27 of those frontline units. And so we have an expectation, a minimum amount of times that you can go work with that coachee so that they're getting the information and the support and the dialogue that they need. There is specific criteria that we use to evaluate them. There's a couple people in the audience that were here when we first started coaching, and it used to be like, go talk to them about Lean. And now it's go talk to them about Lean, and there's these certain kinds of things that they really need to have as competencies in order to say that that was successful. And, oh, by the way, we need some feedback about how well we're doing that. So it's become a very formalized process with standard work. We've graduated 45 areas, so they no longer have us at the elbow as coaches. We're available to them when they're in a panic. But they're considered fully functional on that criteria. So we've all gone through, we've observed with them, we've brought in outside eyes, and we've all agreed that they consistently show these leadership behaviors that show that they've grasped this content in their local area. So that's an exciting number for us. And we have 57 of those next level leaders we were talking about, and that includes executives, that's those mid-level managers that are running whole areas. And so those are an important place for us to focus now. We're actually coming up with some more specified criteria that we've been applying to those leaders as well. It's not always easy calling out coaching behaviors of a senior leader. So we want ways in which we can discuss that and have that be valuable instead of sort of terrifying. So we've been working on that. And this bottom graph is just showing that in that fully functional group, we have, at any given time in a month, a certain percentage, 100% of our coachees are in there. We're wanting to grow more greens, people that are fully functional, and fewer reds, people that are not fully functional, and that's just over time. We're doing that, and we track that, and we make sure that that is so, that these folks are indeed moving forward on their journey. Lastly, this is just an important part of data. It's really cool to be able to go out and coach people at the elbow, and it's really cool that you see their behaviors change, but Tim has challenged us to say, how do you know it's making a difference? And so one of the less fun but really important things about our job when we coach is making sure that people share with us the challenges that they're taking on with lean, and that they're, are they moving those metrics? So we track local metrics in our coaching areas just to make sure that it's starting to turn itself into results. Of course, sometimes they're going to fail, but we want to be able to track and see that this methodology makes the work improve. So we do that as a connection point there. We've been doing some fun stuff inside of Tim's area. He has a big span of control, and we've talked as leaders that we want to develop leaders even more. We want to make sure that every leader inside the organization has the tools that they need, and also they were asking for it. Every time that we survey through our workforce engagement system, people are saying they want development, and so we wanted to be intentional about that. So inside of Tim's division, we're doing talent assessments, like you might in your organization just naturally do something like a 9-box that tells you where folks are at on your team, but that wasn't part of what's a requirement for us, and now it is inside of Tim's division. We've explored clinical ladders that have turned now into administrative ladders. So in anybody's team inside of Tim's division, if I want to show an intentional path for how people can do extra projects, take extra courses, learn extra skills, they get compensated for that for a period of time as an incentive to really go above and beyond and to develop themselves in certain areas. So that's a really exciting thing that we're just starting to flesh out in terms of details. And then we're doing an administrative residency. My lean team wants to go out and conquer the world and show their skills inside of management roles. They're amazing people, and they need to learn about what it means to be in operations and what that life looks like. And also, folks in operations often don't have the lean skills that they need, and sometimes coming in and just being embedded in the lean department can be a powerful way to develop those skills instead of just having your coach show up a couple times a month. So we're starting sort of a swap off between our department and a clinical department in a couple of months, and we're going to use that as a pilot. There's 2 other departments, the PMO who will be involved in that, and also another clinical department. And we'll be initiating that experiment just to see how that does in terms of developing our leaders. And finally, back to our core curriculum, we all agreed that every manager and above inside of Tim's whole organization needed to take those classes that we discussed. So around creating capability, we want them to take the coaching. We want them to take an ODL class on developing successful teams, because there's a lot of soft skills we need people to have as well. And then all of those components I was talking about around managing and improving the business, everybody has a year to take all of this content, and they need to take the lean management systems work, and then they can get a coach. So we're starting to connect more of the pieces together to create a whole package around creating capability within our leaders and also within our teams. Tim, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thank you.
So I'll walk you through one more dimension on that framework, and this is our strategic planning framework. And it centers around our employees, our patients, our community, really gets at the values of Denver Health. As you move out to that middle ring, there's clinical care research, education, key components of any academic medical center. Really important work has to occur inside of that band. And then if you move out again to that outer band, quality, safety, and service, operational excellence, community and academic engagement, and growth initiatives. And this is where we try to focus the organization on our big transformative goals inside of that space. So our strategic planning process is probably not any different than yours. It's pretty straightforward. There's no, magic aha in what we do. We develop a 5-year plan. We're ratcheting that back this year to a 3-year plan because we're finding that, boy, it's just so hard to try to think about what's going to happen in healthcare in 5 years. And we're kind of kidding ourselves if we think we can. That gets board approved. As we develop our plan, we make sure that it's generating enough cash to generate the margins that we need to keep the cash on hand that the board requires to build the buildings, to buy the equipment, to pay the people, to give the raises. We try to look at what our HR implications are inside of our plan over the next few years, who's retiring, what problems will we have in terms of recruitment. And we overlay that on a master facility plan. What do we need to build? Where do we have challenges inside of our space? So that's all pretty typical. Translate that down into a big organizational board scorecard. Again, nothing magic there. It's a scorecard that makes sure that we have big goals across multiple areas. It's just sort of best practice. Now it starts getting hard. Now we got to translate those big goals down to the department level into their balanced scorecard. And then we got to start doing some work. And we got to start aligning this organization up, down, and across. And we use these tools that we've been highlighting this morning. So one of the things that Baldrige does is it challenges you is how well have you deployed every instance and every patient and every opportunity? Have you done what you said you want to do? And boy, that sounds great. And it's like, yeah, boy, we want to do that. But it's really hard. And I don't know if you're familiar with this term that they use, ADLI, what is the approach? How are you deploying? What are you learning? And how are you integrating? But it's a good reminder, and it also reminds you just how hard this work is. So up, down, across, from the top from those strategies, up, down, and across this organization, how do we get 7,000 people aligned and moving in the right direction? And I say this in every time I speak, this is the hardest work I have ever been about. It is so difficult to get the alignment that's necessary to really move a big organization forward. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Now remember what I said at the beginning. It is a state of becoming, not a state of being. And we're working on this. We work on it every single day. So what is Target Zero? Unfortunately in healthcare, if you come in and you're an inpatient or cared for in our emergency department, and this isn't just Denver Health, this is any organization, there are times when we will do something to you that had nothing to do with your condition. So we actually might make it worse. You might end up with a pressure ulcer. You might end up needing a medicine that was supposed to be delivered at this time and it was delayed an hour. Or a medication error, heaven forbid. You might fall on your way to the bathroom. There are things that could happen to you in a healthcare setting that are no fault of your own, that are preventable. And so we've set a target of 0 across all of those things. We don't want to harm you while you're in our care. That number should be 0. Now, realistically, we have to set some interim goals in order to get to 0, but we have put a big emphasis on target 0. So let's start at the top. Not harming patients. That aligns with our mission. It aligns with our values. It aligns with who we are, everything about us. All right, great. Let's put it in our strategy. All right, we're going to launch a Target Zero plan. We're going to be about this. We're going to bring attention to it and resources to it, and we're going to eliminate harm in this organization. We're going to put it on our scorecard at the top. We're going to report it to our board of directors. So far, so good. Now, I got to start deploying it. Our ultimate goal is to get to 0. Our interim annual goal is no more than 20 harms per month. Now, I've got critical care areas, surgical ICUs, pediatric ICUs, medical ICUs, multiple areas. I've got med-surg areas. I've got behavioral health areas. I've got adolescent psych areas. Now I got to start deploying into all of them. Now I got multiple units. Med-surg areas, different floors, different units. Now I got different shifts, weekends, nights, different days of the week. You get the idea. How do I get that urgency and that attention from a board-approved strategy all the way up and down this organization? And without these tools that we're talking about, without this discipline that we're talking about, without standard work that we're talking about, it would be impossible. There's a great quote from, what's his name? I don't know. Billy Graham. Billy Graham.
Oh, no.
Like he just So Billy Graham's wife, and somebody asked him, what's the hardest part about marriage? And Billy Graham's wife said, the dailiness of it. And I was like, boy, that's profound, because that's what this is. The hardest, there's a bunch of energy. Yeah, we need to get to zero, target zero in the board. This makes sense. The board's like, yeah, do it. Now, how do you translate that up, down, and across an entire organization? If you don't have standard work, if you don't have engaged people, if you don't have review, if you don't have the means by which to do that, you will fail. If all you do is get in a meeting with a bunch of directors and say, go work on falls, go work on infections, go work on med errors, and report back to me in a month, it will fail. 100%. So this was the work, and we are in the midst of this work. And this graph is wonderful in some ways, and it's telling in other ways. So let me orient you to it, because it's not immediately evident. This blue line were the number of harm events we had in 2016. So this is cumulative across the year, so we just add them on top of each other, so it always starts low and builds up across the year. This black line was how many harm events we had by month cumulative in 2017. All right, everybody with me so far? I'm sorry, this was 15, this is 16, this is 17. So we started putting in place this strategy between those 2 years, and we had dramatic improvement in reducing harm events. The gap between here and here is, 260 down to 170. That's a big percentage drop. That's a lot of improvement. All right, but this is an ongoing thing. Now we've got to build off of this, and we've got to beat that in 2018. So this shaded area is our target for 2018. That's what we want to hit, and at the end of the year, we set targets that would get us from whatever that is, 170 down to 130. This is our actual. So I said there's some good news in this graph, and there's some challenging news in this graph. The good news in this graph is we were way up here. We're harming a whole lot less people. The bad news in this graph, or the challenging news, is we are not hitting our target in 2018. So we need to redouble our efforts around what it is that's preventing us from getting the incremental improvement that we need. And to everybody in this room that studies, operations and performance improvements, sometimes those early gains are sometimes your easiest gains. And, getting that last little bit is the much harder part. So I'll tell on ourselves again. I was at Gamble Walk yesterday, and there was a nurse manager, and she's talking about falls. And they track how many days between falls. And she had an event, I don't know, maybe a couple of weeks ago. And unfortunately, we had staff in the room, we had physicians in the room. When the patient wanted to get up, the bed alarm went off. The patient wanted to go to the bathroom. And the staff was not attuned enough to know that this was a fall risk, and allowed the patient to go to the bathroom. The patient fell. All right, and we could say, well, those physicians ought to do better. But what inside of that process, what inside of that training, what inside of that communication did we miss that allowed that to occur? And so that's the kind of thing that we need to be mindful of. I'll give you another example about how hard this is. Smoking cessation. So probably not a surprise, the incidence of Denver Health patients that smoke is greater than the incidence of city and county of Denver population in general that smoke. And it's around, I want to say, 26%. One of the things I didn't mention at the beginning when we were looking at the infograph is we have the public health department here in Denver Health, which is really cool. And so we have a mindset of, treating somebody that comes in that are sick, that has a disease, that is injured. And the public health has a mindset of how do I prevent them from getting sick, being injured, getting a disease. And so it adds a wonderful dynamic inside of our strategic planning. But one of the things that they want to do, one of the things that they're about, not surprisingly, is how do I reduce smoking in our patients? And what's really interesting, just as an aside, you don't start smoking after the age of 22. I mean, there's no evidence that shows that a lot of people just, hey, I'm 22 years old, I'm going to start smoking. Everybody starts when they're younger. And so as you think and you look at that data and you study, it's like, boy, we're one generation away from solving this problem. If I could get one generation to not smoke from the time that they're born to the time they're 21, it goes away. So we're about this. We think this is really important. So we have 26%, and we studied the literature. But we have people that enter our system in a bunch of places. They come in our clinics. They come in our methadone clinics. They come into our primary care, into our specialty care. They come into our ED. They get transported by ambulance. They come into our hospital. They come in a bunch of ways. And so public health was, yikes, how do I begin to get my arms around all these patients that are coming into a big system in a variety of ways? But they knew it was worthwhile because they'd studied the literature and they saw, if you give brief advice, if you ask if you smoke, if you counsel against smoking, and if you refer to quit lines and other resources, you can begin to make a dent in this. So public health knew that there's a pathway forward to reducing this. We have to be about some certain behaviors. But if they only get primary care to be about these behaviors, and most of our patients enter in another way, or if they only get the ED to be about these behaviors, we won't move the needle. Every, up, down, and across. So if this is best practice, how do we implement it across an entire organization with sort of different management imperatives and different urgencies? And so they said, well, it's going to be hard, but let's wade into it. We got Epic. Epic is our electronic health record. Let's start using it. Let's start using it to the advantage and the quality of our patients. And so they said, we're going to set a goal. We want to see a 1% reduction in Denver Health patients that smoke year over year over year. And I've talked to Bill Berman, and Dr. Berman is the executive director of public health. And I said, where did you come up with that goal? And he said, we pulled it out of the air. But anyway, so he's got a goal, 1% per year. Physicians are about this. Physicians know the health risks in heart disease and other things if you smoke, life expectancy, quality of life. So physicians are about this work. So that part we could check. Now we had to start getting into the standard work in every clinic, in every setting. And so we began to do real cascade of information up and down and across the organization. If you're on the front line, your job is to make sure that every patient comes in is asked if they smoked and to make sure that electronic record is updated. If you're a physician in your office visit and you see that they're a smoker, it is your standard work to say, hey, can I give you some advice? Can I prescribe a patch? Can I refer you to some resources that can help you? And then we began to track this up, down, and across the organization in every setting. And the results are stunning. Being about this in a diligent, daily, standard way with the right champions tied to the strategy of the organization. And we are bringing this down. These are just examples of different interventions across the timeline. That's a lot of years. That's a lot of patience to just say, hey, this isn't going to happen overnight. We're going to be about this not only in 2011, we're going to be about it in 12 and 13 and 14 and 15 and 16 and 17 and 18 and on until we can eliminate smoking. So these things, back to what I said earlier about some of our reflection points. What are you trying to do? Are you good at it? Do you have a core competency in it? Does it tie to your mission? Can you trace it back to what it is you're about, what your values are, where your vision and trying to go? These are two examples that I think tell that story wonderfully. So we wanted to give you a sense of each of those three sections, where we are with tools and capability, where we are with training our staff and giving them the skills they need to be successful, and then ultimately how we're trying to align the work we do to our big overarching strategies. And with that, I'll open up for questions. We have time for questions? Yes.
How many people in your lean group?
Of course. How do we deal with naysayers? It would depend on who you ask. One of my titles is a Chief Acceleration Officer. And, nobody knows what that means, so it makes it a great title because nobody knows what I'm supposed to do. But it's based off a John Kotter book about acceleration. And it talks about speed in the marketplace can be a competitive advantage. And so how do you think about that? And John, he wrote the eight steps of change. So he's a change management guru. But his thinking has evolved over the course of his career. And one of the things where John is at now is exactly to your point. We spend too much time with naysayers trying to bring them along. He says, how about this? Rather than go out and hire consultants to come in and tell you what to do, or to spend all your time and energy and effort trying to convince naysayers to move forward, why don't you find the people in your organization that really want the change, they get it, and would feel privileged to be a part of it. Identify them and just hook your wagon onto them and start going. And so that's one approach that we've taken, is we got to move quick on some things. We're going to move thoughtful on some things. But this isn't about trying to, if you drive the bell curve, trying to get those folks at the one extreme that are trying to delay and stop everything that we do. That's one approach. Sometimes it's just like, this is where we're going. This is mandatory. We need you to get along. Sometimes it's, this is a voice we need to listen to, and this isn't just an ongoing naysayer, but there are some real thoughtful concerns here. We need to be mindful of that. So it depends on the situation. It depends on the individual. In no way would I say this organization just tries to railroad over people, but there are some things where once we've set a target, once we've set a direction, once the board is on board, we got to go. Yes.
So you had operational excellence one of your
right. I'm not sure I understand you. Is lean a part of our other strategic areas?
In our circle, operational excellence is just carved out as a portion of it, and do we participate in the other areas? So absolutely, and in multiple ways. So I'll just use an example of the patient safety quality work. Dave Draper, I'm going to put him on the spot. He is helping to support those efforts the same way that Sharif is assigned to the first floor operational excellence. And then even within the growth areas, we're doing a Center of Excellence strategic/financial plan for this fall. And we're walking through that using the same sort of deployment tools. And when asked, inside of community, the smoking cessation being a great example of that, that came out of that part of the thing, and they're using a lean approach there as well. So, yeah.
It pervades that entire framework. Yes, ma'am.
Do we have metrics for the lean team? Well, you could ask the lean team. Yes, we do. Maybe much to their dismay or chagrin. I don't know. We track some. So if we have a lean event, we're going to track not only the outcomes of that lean event, but we're going to track whether or not what was their level of satisfaction with the facilitation, how was the prep for that. We've done that for a really long time. But we do that same thing for coaching. We track the numbers of coaching encounters that we've had with each coachee, how well they rate the lean team in terms of knowledge on the content, delivery of that, their service expectations. There's a bunch of stuff. I don't know, Jeremy, is there? Yeah, coaching encounters, things like that.
Also, the coaches say that suggest we only meet out. We do a certain number of encounters with all those coaching areas, as well as get metrics reported back to the team. So there's a number of things that we look at. Try to ensure that we're doing the things that we need to do to support the organization.
And my bosses are really great about coming around and coming to my Gemba walks. We've evolved where we can see it's important that how we do our work also matters. that we're not just all about making sure that other people deliver on the results, that there's behaviors we have to have that support that better. And so Tim comes around and looks at our board. My boss, Mark, comes around, he's there every week talking about our performance and our internal capabilities.
Yeah, so that point about leader-centered work is an important one. In that fully functional criteria, when these guys started evaluating, that was the one thing that we scored the worst on, is we're good at standard work, we're good at thinking about process-solving problems, evidence of A3, alignment, strategies and targets aligned to the overall organizational efforts. But where's the evidence of leader-standard work? That habit of, I'm going to carve out time inside of my calendar, and I'm going to go and I'm going to see, as a way to coach, as a way to learn, as a way to hear about barriers and help remove those. And so that's been a big effort of the organization from the very top down, is how do we cascade that habit of review and leader standard work inside of this management system. Yes, sir.
Did everyone hear that? That was about transformative change versus continuous improvement. And I guess one example I would use is we have a methodology, you guys likely know it, the 3P methodology. When we're asked to do, anytime we're asked if there's a building built or planned, the lean team is engaged in making sure that they support innovative thought around how that space could function differently, as an example, using really out-of-the-box innovative thinking around that. So there's a commitment for every single renovation and new site that we would use that thinking there. And we're starting to get people to really embrace that they could use that methodology for big processes as well. So we've had some success in that space. This center that we're talking about, we're going to, as they think about being more strategic, we want them to take a couple of their service areas and apply more breakthrough innovative thinking in that space, as opposed to just making sure that the surgeries get through the operative flow better than they have in the past.
I'll give one more example. So in April of 2016, we went live with Epic. We put in place an entirely new electronic health record in every area aspect of our organization, all the clinical record, all the financial information. And in October of that year, we were projecting about $30 million on a forward run rate of net revenue that we weren't getting post-Epic. Our margins are really thin. We make about $1 billion of net revenue, so 30 million is 3%. That's usually double what our net operating margin is of about 1.5%. So we were in trouble. So we had an all-hands-on-deck effort, and through value stream analysis in two areas, surgery and OB, we identified where that system and where those processes and workflows were broke, from the care of the patient to the bill goes out the door. And then we marshaled the lean team to go observe in every instance where we could find clinic, inpatient, and ambulatory or ancillary as we scaled this up across the entire organization. So we went from two areas to the entire organization to reverse this challenge we had inside our revenue. And if we didn't have that lean team, if we didn't have those skills, if we didn't have that systematic thinking, and we didn't have that in our DNA about standard work and process, we would still be struggling with this, to my opinion. We'd still be meeting, and finance would be pounding the table. Epic's broke, and Epic would be like, no, it's not. And doctors would be saying, you're not coding everything you're supposed to code, and coders are saying, I'm coding everything in the record. And we would have all of this ongoing friction. But because we were able to cut through that with some data, some facts, and maybe most importantly, some direct observation about what was actually happening, we found our way through that. We are well above where we were pre-Epic in terms of our revenue cycle. So that's an example where we had to be nimble, we had to be fast, we had to be thorough. And because we had this in our toolbox, in our DNA, we were able to do that. Big transformative work.